Speed, we're told, kills. That's the blunt safety message delivered to motorists on an all too regular basis. But now, 2 states and territories are considering raising the speed limit. So would that lead to even more deaths on our roads? Australia's leading road safety expert, Russell White, joins us now from the gorgeous Gold Coast this morning. Russell, good morning to you.
Good morning, Deb.
So should this option of raising speed limits even be talked about? Could it make our roads safer?
Look, I think any topic about raising speed is always going to create a lot of headlines and a lot of interest. But I really think that, to try and adopt something like that with where we are at the moment could ultimately be counterproductive. And the reason I say that is that I think we need to get to a stage where we've got 5-star cars on 5-star roads with 5-star drivers. And at the moment, I don't think we're anywhere near that sort of position. There
have been big upgrades, though, to the roads network. A lot of the key corridors in various states, a lot of money's been pumped into improving the roads. We know that the safety of cars that we drive in these days is much greater than it has been in previous years. In light of that, cars being safer, roads, more money being spent, surely we could have another rethink of the speed limit.
Well, Deb, I think it's always healthy to try and review these sorts of things on a continual basis, because you're right. I mean, things do evolve and things do change. We've still got a lot of roads in this particular country that they're around about the 1 and 2 star in terms of safety standards. So maybe it might be an idea to get all those roads to a decent safety level before we start looking at upgrading the ones that are already pretty good, getting them up to a different stage. And I guess to take your point again a step further, you're right. There is an improvement in vehicle safety, absolutely no doubt about that. But I think when we look at the age of the fleet that's in this country, we are a little bit different to Europe and to other parts of the world that have these slightly higher speed limits. So I think the other thing that we also have to consider, though, is culture. And I guess having spent the last 25 years sitting next to drivers, I really know that a great deal of them are really underprepared and don't use the sort of skills they need to adopt and use all the time anywhere near well enough. So I think, again, as I said, if the roads are up to it, if the cars are up to it, if we have the drivers up to it, it's certainly worth considering. But I think we've got to take the safety impact, or that potential safety impact, and put it in a context of the situation that we currently have at the moment.
We are seeing, though, the number of deaths on our roads declining. I think the number of deaths annually has actually gone down from 2005 to 2014.
Mm-hmm. And you're right, and again, that's something that I think we're seeing the lowest road fatality rates since probably the 1940s or thereabouts. But what the untold story is that whilst the fatality rates have actually come down, and that's been because of Australian design rules and better enforcement, things like that, the actual number of crashes really haven't had any reduction at all. And in fact, what we're seeing is almost the opposite, where the fatalities are still coming down, but the number of crashes are still occurring. And more importantly, I think the actual injury rates that are happening are well and truly on the climb. For every 1 fatality, there's at least 30 people that have been seriously injured or hospitalised. And I think that's probably the untold story that we've got to look at. It's great that the fatality rates are coming down, but I think we really need to continue to adopt this approach to trying to achieve greater safety right across the board, and moving our focus from not only just fatalities but to reducing injuries as well.
So what about the Northern Territory experience? Because we know they have open limits on a lot of their roads, and they're now looking at extending it. They've had a trial running now for 18 months, which has been quite successful. Why wouldn't that open speed limits on roads that are of good quality work in the rest of the country?
Well, again, Deb, if the roads are up to it, and I said I think if we've got the right context around it, it's certainly worth developing. I mean, Australia's speed limits have been reviewed, really since they first came in, in that sort of 1930s, 40s type of period, and I think that will always evolve as things do get better. It's healthy for us to keep looking at those limits, but I think if you're looking at Northern Territory, we've got to be a little bit careful there. Their death per 100,000 population is actually worse than Chile's, which is probably one of the lowlights in terms of global road safety. So I think we've got to be careful with how we use the Northern Territory example as an example, and I guess the context of how that's used. There's no doubt, I think that, as I said before, that if we had a much greater level of driver awareness and there was a different culture here, I think that's the other bit that's missing. Then we could continue to review those speed capabilities. But I think we've got to have greater level of awareness. Drivers have to have a greater level of situational awareness, because obviously when you're going at an increased speed, the consequences of an error are much greater. You know, if something happens at X number of kilometres at twice the speed, it's not twice as hard, it's actually 4 times as hard.
Yeah, and that's what we're always hearing. Better driver training could be the key to all of this. Russell, really good to get your insights this morning. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, Deb. Take care.